Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you would illustrate white fabrics. I get this question a lot and I understand it. Yeah, because usually we use white paper and then we draw our stuff on it. And if you don't do it right, it just looks like you didn't color, like you didn't color your clothes. Sometimes it looks kind of unfinished. So I'm going to just quickly go over a few tips on how to handle white fabrics. And if you have more specific questions for me, or if you want me to explain something more in depth, feel free to drop me a comment below. Number one, my favorite and I think the best way to render white fabrics is to use colored paper. There are white gouaches and inks and even markers, color pencils, charcoal pencils, gel pens, all kinds of stuff out there to use on colored paper. I typically recommend to my students Canson paper. It's like this lightly textured, about 90-pound colored paper. I recommend that you get light colors like grays and creams, off-whites, because they'll be colorful enough for your whites to pop, but at the same time, you'll be able to see your croquis on a light box. If you decide you want to use something like navy or purple, chances are you'll have to use transfer paper or some other method to do your drawing first. Number two, I like doing double shadows. And by double shadows, I don't mean take the 3 kinds of shadow and make it 6 kinds of shadow. If you don't know what I mean by the 3 kinds of shadow, go check out my 3 kinds of shadow video, which explains how I use one light source to create shadows around the body to make it look 3D. No, you keep your 3 kinds of shadow, but you punch it up with a darker shadow color inside your previous shadows. Do you see how I have a darker gray inside the lighter gray to create more in-depth shadows? Number three, I like working with different color shadows. There are a lot of different whites. You know this. We have winter whites, we have summer whites, we have warm whites, we have cool whites. I like to show that off by using different shadow colors. First of all, you have cool grays, warm grays, French grays. Some marker brands are making what they call neutral grays. I don't know what that means. Sometimes they're not that much more neutral, but they exist. So there are a lot of grays out there. I also sometimes like to use warmer colors like really muted beiges, taupes, and ecru's for shadows. My studio lights are so bright today. What the hell? I swear I'm not hungover. But it's really bright in here. Am I squinting a lot? It's really bright in here. Number four, just get really precise with all the details. Like if you are doing a white chunky knit, just gotta make sure you get in there with all the texture and make sure you really bring that out. Sometimes I don't do faces for all of my illustrations, but when I'm doing white, sometimes I will do faces just so the whole rendering looks more complete. I make sure the hair is extra cool looking, and I make sure that, like all the little details, all the seams, all the textures, all the design details are super on point. Sometimes I offer a looser style. I tend not to do that with white. That's just something I have to sacrifice to make sure that my illustration looks complete. Making something look loose and vague, and that's cool. That's not really what we designers do anyway. We leave the loose and vague to the illustrators, but I take it up a notch, especially when I'm doing white, especially when I'm doing an all-white outfit or collection. Because if you have, some white tops and you have a lot of jeans and black jackets and stuff, it can look fairly complete. It'll just look like white garments. But if you have an all-white collection, sometimes if you don't do it right, it just looks like, hey, I haven't decided what color to make my collection yet. One last note, some people like to illustrate with a giant drop shadow behind their figure. And for me, I find that that's a technique that works well for illustrators, but not so much for designers. When you're a designer, you want the design details and the textures of your garments to be the most important thing people see. And when you put a big drop shadow back there, the focus shifts to kind of the overall image of the illustration instead. So you can do a big drop shadow if you're looking to create just kind of a big impact, but if you really want to showcase your design specifically, I would stay away from the big giant drop shadow. Rule number one of color theory is contrast makes things pop. So, whenever you're trying to create emphasis of a certain part or you want to direct someone's attention to something, you create a contrast, whether you create a color contrast, a value contrast, a texture contrast, shiny things next to matte things, dark things next to light things, bright things next to neutral things. You create the contrast to make things pop, to catch someone's attention. And so when you have an all white outfit or collection, you want to put it against a darker skin tone to make your white pop all the more. So while that may not affect how finished and complete your rendering looks, I still think it's a good idea, and I think that your illustration will look all that much better for it. And that's it. Those are just some tips on how I render white fabrics. If you have specific questions on specific fabrics, or if you would like me to explain something more in depth, leave me a comment below. If you thought this video was helpful, hit the subscribe button, because in the near future, I'm going to do a similar video on how to deal with rendering black fabrics. Hope that was helpful. See you next time.